A history of Banic, a Crotchety historian's account, or What Every Ignorant Merchant and Ale-Sodden Peasant Should Know But Doesn't, by Master Historian Uldric Greymantle, Keeper of the Ducal Archives. Listen well, you historically illiterate wretches, for I grow weary of correcting the same foolish errors about Banic's past. Let me enlighten your dim minds about the ringed city, that ancient crown of corruption and steel, whose very foundations predate your precious kingdom of Mir by centuries you cannot even count. The age of founding. Time zero. Yes, there was a time before Mir, despite what you believe in the beginning, and pay attention, for this predates your great-great-grandfather's grandfather. Before kingdoms drew their borders or duchies claimed their hills, the lands that would become Banic served as refuge for the desperate and displaced. From the far west came waves of refugees fleeing a continent now lost to memory and myth, carrying with them the principles of feudal governance that your simple minds take for granted today. They mingled with indigenous tribes who had dwelt there since time immemorial, and with wanderers from every corner of the known world. These disparate peoples, united only by their need for survival, planted the seeds of what would grow into the greatest forged city the North has ever known. Not that any of you appreciate this heritage when you complain about the smoke. The era of fracture. Time 1, first 200 years. When your ancestors were still learning which end of a sword to hold. What followed was chaos, a patchwork of feuding petty states, each clawing for dominance over their neighbors. Stop me if this sounds familiar, you factional fools. These embryonic states traded cautiously with peoples to the east and south, while to their north and east, tribal confederations waged endless war upon one another. But the true terror, and here's where you lot always get it wrong, came from the west, from that vast continent of endless grasslands men called the Green Sea. Horse tribes swept down upon Banic's vulnerable settlements from the north with terrible regularity, while their coastal raiders, fishermen turned pirates, burned and pillaged with impunity. Not from the south, as every tavern-tail fool insists. From the west. The forging of identity. Time 2, 200 to 300 years. Pay attention, will be on the examination. Constant warfare transforms peoples as surely as the smith's hammer transforms iron. The relentless pressure from the Green Sea raiders forced the fractured states into uneasy cooperation. Shared blood and shared enemies slowly welded them into a single ethnic identity. In these crucible years, the people of Banic learned their defining lesson: survival demands strength, and strength is forged in steel. This truth would echo through their hammers for 1,000 years hence, until Banic became known as the City of 1,000 Forges, where every blade worth holding, every chain that anchors a ship, every nail in a noble's doorframe, bears its mark. And before you ask, yes, this predates Mir's supposed ancient traditions by half a millennium. The rise of the First Kingdom. Time 3, 300 to 450 years. When Banic was already a power and Mir was still painting themselves blue, from among the warring states one grew dominant, taking unto itself the name Banic. Mark this well, the city was the kingdom was the city. This ascendant power established its seat upon the very hill where the ringed city now stands. Through conquest, cunning, and ruthless political maneuvering, it systematically absorbed or annihilated its rivals, until the name Banic came to mean not merely a city, but an entire realm. The foundations of the concentric rings were laid in this era, though they would be rebuilt and reimagined many times before achieving their current form. Those stones you walk upon daily, they've seen more history than your entire lineage combined. The imperial conquest. Time 4, 450 to 600 years. The occupation your grandparents conveniently forgot to mention. Then came the shadow from the south. A vast empire whose power dwarfed anything the northern lands had conceived turned its gaze toward Banic. Imperial legions swept through the young kingdom with terrifying efficiency. Within the span of a single campaign season, one season, you historically ignorant layabouts, Banic fell. The conquerors built a massive stronghold atop the city's hill. Those same stones now form the innermost ducal ring, where nobles in their marble palaces sip wine and ignore the sweat of workers. From this seat of power, the empire pushed northward into tribal lands and westward toward the plains of the Green Sea, extending its dominion with iron discipline. And before you sputter about Banic's proud independence, we were conquered, occupied, ruled by foreigners for 150 years. Learn it, accept it. Stop pretending otherwise. The Western repulse, time 650 years, when the unstoppable empire discovered it could, in fact, be stopped. But even empires have limits, as you would know if you'd bothered to read any of the accounts I've painstakingly preserved. The horse tribes of the Green Sea proved unconquerable, an endless ocean of mounted warriors who melted before imperial formations only to reform and strike again. Unable to subdue the plains, the empire vented its fury upon the continent's coastline instead, systematically destroying ships, razing port towns, and annihilating any maritime infrastructure that might threaten its control. The Green Sea continent was denied them, but they ensured no one else would claim it either. This, you naval-obsessed fools, is why Banic came late to sea power. The Northern Liberation, time 670 years. The glorious liberation that was actually quite messy. Meanwhile, to the north, the tribes were changing, slowly adopting the feudal structures their southern neighbors had introduced, structures they'd mocked for centuries, I might add. They grew in organization and ambition. Led by the tribes of Mir, who would later lend their name to the United Kingdom and never let anyone forget it. They assembled a coalition army of unprecedented scale and marched upon Banic. The empire's army were weakened from costly campaigns against the Green Sea horsemen. After a pitched battle lasting 93 days, on and around Hackett Mountain, the empire crumbled before this northern tide. Rather than commit to a protracted reconquest, the empire negotiated withdrawal, abandoning Banic to its liberators. Notice that word, negotiated. It wasn't the glorious rout your tavern songs claim. Yet the empire's retreat was not complete. In the depths beneath their abandoned stronghold, a cult of the empire remained. The Hand, devoted to Samael. These shadowy followers burrowed into Banic's underbelly, ruling from darkness, poisoning the city's politics with corruption that would fester for generations. Perhaps this explains why even centuries later, everyone is looking for a bribe and way up, even the law. Your corruption has ancient roots, councilman. Stop acting surprised. The Coral Wall, time 740 years. The price we're still paying for our ancestors' desperation, the empire's withdrawal proved temporary, as any competent student of history could have predicted. Within a generation, imperial fleets returned with vengeance in their sails, ravaging the loosely confederated northern dukedoms. Ironically, this aggression accomplished what centuries of peaceful negotiation could not. It forced the northern powers into true unity. After a catastrophic naval engagement that saw Glenn and Banic's entire fleets destroyed, save for a single vessel, desperation drove men to dark bargains. A priest, his name lost to history or deliberately forgotten by embarrassed descendants, offered a sacrifice of apocalyptic proportions to what had been a minor sea deity, Nethalos. 100 captured imperial sailors with a solemn vow of 100 more each year in perpetuity. In perpetuity, do you understand what that means? Forever. We are still paying this blood price, you historically ignorant merchants who complain about superstitious maritime traditions. The dark power he petitioned listened. From the ocean floor erupted a mountain range of living coral, an impassable barrier stretching between the southern empire and northern continents. Sea lanes that had carried commerce and conquest for millennia became death traps. Only the smallest craft could navigate the treacherous passages, and then only after appropriate sacrifices. The age of imperial invasion ended, sealed beneath a tomb of coral. But the price, written in blood upon the altar of survival, continues to be paid to this day, whether you acknowledge it or not. The kingdom of Mir and Banic's transformation, time 740 to 1300 years. When we reluctantly joined the upstart kingdom you all worship, 2 centuries of intermittent warfare among the northern states followed before they were finally consolidated under the banner of Mir. And here's what your proud Mirish histories conveniently omit. Banic joined this kingdom last, and most reluctantly, the fifth duchy, the least loyal, yet paradoxically the oldest of them all. We were already ancient when Mir was born. Remember that next time some provincial duke lectures us about tradition. While mountain fortifications and enduring fear of open water kept the green sea riders at bay and the coral wall held the empire distant, Banic rebuilt itself into something unique and terrible. The city grew around the imperial stronghold's bones, developing its distinctive four-ring structure that every merchant describes but none understand. Each ring became a tier of power and privilege, not by accident but by deliberate design over centuries. Nobles who had survived imperial occupation claimed the inner rings closest to the duke's seat. Those who had administered the city for the empire, collaborators whose expertise proved too valuable to execute, though I'm sure their descendants prefer not to think about that, took the third ring, which became the civic ring of bureaucrats and trade administrators. The outer districts divided into specialized quarters, each devoted to particular crafts and industries. This wasn't random clustering. It was planned urban organization that your spontaneous market towns could never achieve. Trust, already scarce in northern lands, became Banic's rarest commodity. Waves of occupation, liberation, and betrayal created a society fundamentally incapable of confidence in others or their institutions. Even coinage from other duchies was suspect. Banic minted its own currency, each coin bearing distinctive marks to prevent fraud, though fraud remained the city's primary occupation nonetheless. The dukes, paranoid and isolated in their innermost ring, refused to maintain a standing army, fearing it might be turned against them. A reasonable fear, given our history, though none of you bother to ask why. Instead, they employed mercenaries, leading to the establishment of the mercenary lodges, 19 independent companies that grew into a power unto themselves, simultaneously protecting and threatening the city's stability. As wealth concentrated in the inner rings, the poor were systematically pushed outward. Class stratification made geographic, if you had the education to understand the concept, until finally the open wall was erected to expel them from the city proper. A vast shanty town sprouted on Banic's northern flank, where the desperate masses built their lives from scraps. Among these forgotten thousands, worship of Silpheria, a demigod of fertility and healing, took root, offering hope the inner rings had long abandoned. Her followers slowly constructed a massive church within the shanty town's sprawl, creating a spiritual counterweight to the Duke's temporal power. This religious division mirrors our political fractures, but you'd need to understand both theology and history to grasp that. Throughout these centuries, the forges never ceased their labor. Day and night, the clang of hammers plays like endless music, while the air chokes with the thick smell of molten iron. The noise and stench became Banic's signature, impossible to forget once experienced, though visiting nobles complain as if we forged steel for our amusement rather than their profit. The city's prosperity was built upon steel and upon the ruthless exploitation of countryside resources. Towns like Blackdown produced the charcoal that fed Banic's endless forges. The nobles deliberately kept such resources cheap, maximizing their profits while rural communities scraped by on subsistence. Which brings us finally to the present crisis that none of you saw coming, because none of you studied the patterns of history. The present age, last 100 years, old threats, new dangers, or why ignoring history dooms you to repeat it. Though the coral wall endures, the empire has discovered circuitous routes for sending occasional merchants and spies northward. Anyone with basic strategic thinking could have predicted this. More ominously, magic, carefully restricted and monitored for centuries, and for good reason, has recently opened paths through interdimensional warrens, offering potential land bridges that could bypass the coral wall entirely. The empire may yet return, not with ships, but through doorways between worlds. But I'm sure this won't concern you until imperial soldiers are standing in your counting houses. Meanwhile, mysterious fires have begun consuming Banic's hinterland towns. Blackdown burned under circumstances still unexplained, its charcoal-producing families crushed in a single night of flame. The town was 10 days' ride, 30 days' walk from the capital. Close enough that it should have raised alarm, yet far enough that the city's nobility pretended not to notice. Whether this represents simple banditry, noble intrigue, or something far darker remains unknown. What is certain is that Banic is your kingdom's oldest city, built in an age long forgotten. And darkness seems drawn to it like moths to flame. Moths to flame, an apt metaphor for our entire history, really. Banic, today, a city of contradictions which you inhabit without understanding. Modern Banic stands as a monument to human ambition and corruption intertwined. It is the ringed city, where each concentric level reflects another tier of power and degradation. It is wealthy beyond measure, yet corrupt to its foundations. Though I notice the latter bothers you far less than it should. It commands military might through mercenary gold, yet remains perpetually unstable. Its forges produce the finest steel in the known world, yet this productivity rests upon ruthless exploitation that you benefit from daily while deploring in principle. The city's four rings, ducal, noble, civic, and outer districts, embody centuries of conquest, occupation, liberation, and consolidation. Beyond even these lies the shanty town and the open wall, where forgotten masses survive on scraps while building monuments to gods the inner rings abandoned long ago. Travelers describe streets packed shoulder to shoulder, shouting, a chaos of commerce and desperation. Young men coming to the city for the first time hear that buildings there touch the sky and wonder if they'll find opportunity or destruction. The road wardens who patrol the countryside have no authority within Banic's walls, for the city guards itself through mercenary companies whose loyalties shift with the weight of coin, and 5 sects of watchmen each loyal to different parts of the city. This is Banic's legacy, a city that joined the kingdom of Mir last because it remembers what others have forgotten. It was a power before Mir existed, survived an empire when Mir was still tribes, and will likely endure long after Mir fades into the same obscurity that claimed the western continent of legend. The ringed city bows to no one willingly. Every gesture of submission conceals a dagger, every oath hides a scheme. For 1,000 years, Banic has been forged and reforged in fire and treachery. And like the steel its smiths are famous for, it has only grown harder with each tempering. Now, having enlightened your woefully inadequate understanding of history, perhaps you'll stop asking foolish questions about why Banic operates as it does. We are what our history made us, ancient, cynical, and still standing when prettier, nobler cities have crumbled to dust. Class dismissed. Try not to forget everything by morning. Master Historian Uldric Greymantle, keeper of the Ducal Archives, year 1300. Those who ignore history are doomed to annoy historians.